I was thinking about how 10 years ago, at 72, when we moved in together, probably for you feels like a drastically different life than it does now at 82.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we moved in together 10 years ago, I was in good health and I loved the idea of having this beautiful apartment. I loved not having any responsibilities of home ownership at all, as you well know. And I also felt that I could bring a lot to the relationship because I still could do a lot. Your kids were young. I was able to share the driving that you were doing all the time to bring them here, there, and everywhere.
Yep.
And I also could cook at the time. I used to bake for the holidays. There's a lot of things I could do, so I didn't feel like I was an imposition. I felt like I was more useful.
Yeah.
That's all changed in the past two, it's actually going on 3 years now.
There comes a time, somewhere after 50, when you realize home isn't just about where you live. It's about how you live. It's about who you're becoming and what you're ready to make space for. I'm Julie Ford, real estate expert and longtime wellness coach, and someone who's lived in a multi-generational home for the past decade while reinventing my life and my business. And this is Home After 50. A podcast about what it really means to find, shape, and come home to a new season, to a new home, to a new version of yourself. Whether you're thinking about upsizing, downsizing, moving in with family, or just asking bigger questions about what's next, you're in the right place. Each episode, I will share stories, insights, and real strategies for women redefining home and life on their own terms. Because after 50, home isn't just a place, it's a calling. And this time, it's yours. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Julie.
Thanks for being here on my podcast.
Of course. Why wouldn't I be?
Well, I'm very excited that you're my first guest, and I think that that is so appropriate since I talk so much about multi-generational living, and I wouldn't be talking about it at all if we didn't live together.
That's right.
So I have not prepared a script for us. I thought we would just have a casual conversation like we might if we were just having coffee, except the funny thing about this is so that we can record this podcast. We're in the same house, but we're on two different floors because there was no other way to get the audio and the video right for this. So for everybody watching, my mom is downstairs from me right now, and I've been running up and down fixing lights and sound. But here we are in the same house, but one floor apart, which is actually a good lead-in because that's kind of how we live our lives.
That's right.
So the way our home is set up is that my mom has this beautiful apartment downstairs, and then we're in the main house upstairs, and she has her own entrance, and it's very much independent living. And one of the things that came up, Mom, last week when I was thinking about recording this was I was thinking about how for you especially, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, how life looked and how this situation looked 10 years ago at 72 when we moved in together, when you were 72, probably for you feels like a drastically different life than it does now at 82.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah. When we moved in together 10 years ago, I was in good health. I was 10 years younger, and I loved the idea of having this beautiful apartment because when I was first looking for apartments after your dad died, I had a criteria list and got one that was almost everything, but this one has everything that I wanted. So I loved that fact. I loved not having any responsibilities of home ownership at all, as you well know. And I also felt that I could bring a lot to the relationship because I still could do a lot. Your kids were young. They were like maybe 10 and 12 at the time, something like that.
Yeah.
And I was a former teacher. And so I ended up being a big part of the homeschool experience.
That's right.
And that was really exciting for me. And even when I was spending winters in Tucson, we could still do it online.
Yep.
So I felt useful. And then also, we live in an area with no public transportation. So I was able to share the driving that you were doing all the time to bring them here, there, and everywhere.
Yep.
And they also could cook at the time. I used to bake for the holidays. There's a lot of things I could do. So I didn't feel like I was an imposition. I felt like I was more useful.
Yeah.
That's all changed in
Yeah.
the past two, it's actually going on 3 years now. The kids are grown, although Lex is still home, thank
Yep.
goodness. I don't do a whole lot of driving. They no longer need homeschooling. Oh, that was great. I love that.
Fully graduated. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so exciting for me to be able to use the math curriculum and figure out how to match it with what they were doing.
Yeah.
And so I really loved being useful. And I also loved the ability that I could just pick up and travel and go where I wanted, some cruises and different Europe stuff, and then to spend most of the winter in Tucson and not have to think about an apartment.
All right, we're back. It was an internet disruption. So when you moved in, actually one of the reasons, so everybody kind of knows our backstory. Like, Dad died 14 years ago. While he was in the last months of his life, we talked about the possibility of creating a multi-generational home. You weren't ready for that right after he died. So it was about 3 years later when you felt ready to talk about it. But one of the reasons that it made so much sense when we first moved in was at that time you were spending like half your time in Tucson. And then it became sort of silly to be like, well, why do you have this other apartment here when you're spending so much time out there? And it made a lot of sense that we would combine households then. Now that only lasted, well, it lasted a few years after that.
Oh, 6 years.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get back to, for anybody listening, we had an internet disruption, so we lost track a little bit, but back on track. We were also talking about homeschooling the kids and how much you enjoyed that and how much we did too. By the way, side note, when my kids did decide to go to high school, because we homeschooled for about 10 years, all of their high school teachers were very impressed with their writing skills because of my mom's teaching during those years, which was great for everyone. It served all of us very well, and it was fun. So talk to me a little bit now about how different life feels for you now, 10 years later.
Very, very different. And hard to talk about it without some tears. But about 2.5 years ago, my health began to deteriorate and deteriorated pretty quickly. And the first year was a lot of dealing with a cancer diagnosis. And I had a lot of other stuff going on. Yeah. And I went from being someone very active, lots of volunteer work, doing tons of different things with people and traveling, and that all shut down. And from the looks of it, the cancer fortunately seems to be gone. But the other issues that came up, which for my age are not unusual, but are pretty serious, I've had to adjust. Wasn't as difficult the first year because I was so sick, it didn't matter as much. But gradually, I've had to cut things out of my life because I don't have the energy or the ability to do them. Walking is difficult for me. Doing stairs, very challenging. Get tired very easily. And I'm not so sure of myself. I mean, I still drive locally, but I don't drive at night.
Right.
So it's been a while for me now. Just before that was COVID, and that was such a blessing that we were all together.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But now it's taken me a hard time, and I still deal with it, not feeling like I'm an obligation to you and Rod, because I hated that. If you knew me growing up, highly independent, was always highly independent. And so I rely on them. And we've had 2 or 3 emergencies with the ambulances in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many doctor's appointments and medical stuff Juli takes me to, although we're lucky because and his wife and my niece are part of that transportation team.
Right. We do have amazing family beyond, our household. And I understand, I totally understand that, Mom, because I'm sure like I would feel the same way. And yet when you think about it, right, no matter where you lived, we would all be facing whatever's happening together. And the truth is, I think from all of our perspectives, the fact that we're living in the same house actually makes it so much easier.
Oh, and so much easier for me to ask. I mean, the first time I thought I was having a heart attack, I didn't want to call you guys down. Now,
Even though we were right upstairs.
Time and we had something in June. I said, oh, I better call them. You know.
Yeah. Well, and then just even small things, like you had a little thing where you had this bandage on your back that had to be changed. And we said, like, every day, if I would like pop down there or check it, or every other day, whatever it was, we were like, oh my gosh, imagine if we didn't live in the same place, what a pain this would be. 'Cause, it was literally on your back, like you couldn't reach it.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. So
Yeah.
I'm gradually getting used to things. I'm lucky because I have high involvement in my church, even though I had to give up being a worship associate and doing some other things. Like tonight at 7 o'clock, I have a meeting with the Committee on Ministry. So I'm still able to connect.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful. I haven't even talked to you about this yet, Julie. Just like my recent scans look pretty good.
Oh,
so
good.
that something
You're all finding out on the podcast that our cancer scans look good.
That's what they feel like. I mean, but the other stuff isn't going to go away, and I have to figure out how to deal with that. But
yeah.
On the whole, I mean, I just feel so blessed, to be part of the extended family. But for you and Rod, you guys cannot imagine how wonderful her husband is. I mean, he's just,
he is a champion. Yeah, he's a good one.
He's the one that pushed from the beginning for the multifamily. And I just wasn't ready. And he was a little annoyed with me. He grew up in a culture where, you don't let your mother or mother-in-law live alone.
Yeah, it's true.
But it's just such a blessing.
Yeah. It is for us as well. I mean, I've told our story from different perspectives on the podcast before, and what this situation has allowed us to do. There's so many layers to this, right? Like the closeness in the relationship with the kids, the help that you were able to give us when, oh my gosh, I mean, all of that driving around help. I was always a working mom. Luckily, when the kids were younger, it was generally part-time and it was always flexible, but I always needed support. I mean, way before we lived together, you always had my kids on Wednesdays. Like every single Wednesday since the kids were born was Grammy Day. And, back when you were cooking more, you would always cook dinner. I would come home from work on Wednesdays. You would have dinner for me too. Like it was always a help. So that was an even bigger help when we all lived together, when you were still, driving a lot and able to do more. And honestly, I mean, lucky for all of us, the trajectory of your health challenges did also line up with the kids needing less because they were older, driving themselves, going to college, but also them being able to help more because, just naturally they're older. So in that way, it's just a full circle, I feel like sometimes. And
I love having Alexa at home.
Me too.
Because Alexa's really chatty and she's really helpful too. Yeah. My son was taking me to an appointment yesterday and I asked him to be my Sherpa and bring a whole bunch of things to the volunteer place I was trying to clean out.
Oh, donations, yeah.
Oh, Grammy, I could do that. And I said, well, don't worry, honey, because it'll be more next week. It's just that concept. And of course, I miss Nick tremendously, who's chosen Colorado because that's where he is supposed to be.
We all miss Nick. Yep.
But he'll be home for Christmas.
He's your going out to lunch buddy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And my other two grandchildren who live fairly nearby keep in touch regularly too. So, just a funny thing, but a grandparent will understand. In the several hospitalizations I've had last year, within 24 hours, I heard from each of the kids by text. And the ones that were close came by.
Yeah.
And that touched my heart so much.
They're good kids. They're really good kids. Well, they're good young adults, I guess, now. They're all in their 20s now. So I wanted to get back to something you said earlier about how happy you are not to have any household responsibilities. And because I get a lot of questions from families about how do we structure a multi-generational home, right? In terms of ownership and financial contribution. And I always say there's a zillion ways to do it. Like there are as many ways to design this as there are different families. And for our family, what worked is Rod and I owning the house and you making a financial contribution. And that was your choice. And it worked for us as well. And we all worked that out together. But can you talk a little bit about why that was your choice?
That was my choice because I had the money available, and I knew that by making a contribution, you would be able to buy the house
Yep.
instead of, having huge debt. They had huge debt.
Right.
And I was very comfortable doing that. And it also reduced my expenses because we negotiated what my share would be of things.
Right.
And so I didn't hesitate to continue going to Tucson for those years because at the time I was maintaining 2 apartments and there was no way that I could have done that for very long.
Right. Right. Yeah. So it extended your income, your retirement income. It grew our equity faster, and people have heard me talk about before that ultimately that allowed us to buy a house to rent to Chris, my brother, and then for him to buy that and us to buy a rental property, which ultimately paid for our kids to go to college. So like the blessing that was really the domino effect of all of us being willing to go in on this together has been amazing. But also you didn't want the responsibility of owning another house after Dad died. So after Dad died, you were clear, actually before he died, but when we knew he was dying, you were clear. By the way, my mom and I laugh about dying, and here's why. Because you may not know this, or you may have if you listen to some of the podcasts. We're not laughing about the fact that my dad died. We've cried rivers about that. But we run death cafes together, and we just really openly talk about death, dying, what that means, how that impacts us. And we really try to find all sides of the emotions related to that together, because how else would we survive? I think that's probably a good way to put it. Okay, so after, even before Dad died, while we knew he was dying, you were 100% clear that you did not want to own a house once he was gone.
Yeah, and we knew that long time ahead of time. He was sick for 7 years.
Yeah.
And so off and on, we would kid about, what's going to happen. Because we knew clearly if I died, he would keep that house.
Yeah.
He would keep that house. Much too big, but he would keep it. And he knew clearly that I wouldn't.
Yeah.
So even when you guys were drawing up plans for this addition to the house where you used to live, and I'll let you go ahead and do it because it was good for him. He was having a great time.
It was good for me too. I think it was good for all of us to just have to think about the idea of what life could look like after he was gone and how we would all support each other, even though it was completely unrealistic to and he probably knew that too. Like it was way too big for that property. We would have overbuilt for the neighborhood. You weren't ready yet, but it was something that we could focus on together to just think about what does life look like after he's gone.
Yeah, and we would talk about it, and one day talk about laughing about things. One day he said to me, "You're not going to do this, are you? You're just humoring me." I said, "Well, you're having fun. It's a good idea." And then he said, "Yeah, but you're going to call the realtor before you call the funeral director, aren't you?" "No, I'll wait a month or two."
Did you even wait that long?
I did. I waited 2 months.
But say a little bit more about why, because people listening probably really don't understand, a lot about like who Dad was in our house growing up and the kind of person he was and the kind of person that you were. So like why it didn't make any sense at all for you to want to own a house after he was gone.
We were married in 1967. I had grown up both of us grew up in very traditional Catholic homes where women had this role and men had this role. And so when I got married, I had lived in an apartment with my mother after my dad died for many years. I could cook, I could clean, I could shop, I could do all the traditional women's roles at those times. Ask me what a plunger was, which is another funny story, but ask me where the power is, where I didn't know any of that stuff. And we continued that, socially in different parts of our life, we went our own ways, but as household chores, we were very traditional 60s couple and how that ran. And it really hit home for me because the day after he died, the day after his funeral, I had a close friend from the Midwest come. She was staying with me for a while, and the house had a lot of people in it. So evidently the toilet got clogged. So Marcia comes hopping down one morning and says, "Jane, I need the plunger." I said, "What's a plunger?" She said to me, okay, you're right. You don't belong in the house. That was part of it. I just didn't know how to do any of those things. And I didn't want to do
You
any of
didn't
those.
want to. And, and dad probably didn't want you to either.
Oh, God, no. Oh, when I had to put out the rubbish and do things, as he couldn't do anything. He was so concerned about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But all my life, I had relied on him to do things for me. And I have a girlfriend, Jenny, who does everything. Lived alone 25 years. She could do anything. And
Mm.
she said, "Hey, I can show you how." I said, "No, thank you." So
I
that's
want to know
why
how. Yeah.
I knew clearly, because they often say, and we talk about this in our death groups sometimes, that, oh no, don't do anything right away. Don't make any big decisions. And people were quite upset that didn't know me well enough. You shouldn't put the house on the market for a year
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. But you guys knew it, and I knew it, that I had already made that decision.
Yeah, and it made sense to us. The other thing I want to say, because people don't know you that well yet, is despite the fact that you and dad took on traditional roles in terms of household responsibilities, you were quite well equipped to deal with other aspects, I think, of being independent. Like you ran the money in the household, you worked always. So there were many aspects to your marriage that were not like old school 60s traditional, but just the house itself did maintain that tradition, and it worked
Yeah.
for both of you.
It worked absolutely for both of us because he didn't like to travel, particularly overseas. And
Yeah.
I'd go out the door with my couple of close friends, and he'd say, "Bye, honey. Have a great time.
As long as I don't have to get on a plane, go have fun.
Yeah, go have that wine that you like and those gourmet meals." He was very simple days.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was we were very lucky because we met when we were kids, and you never know. We dated for 8 years, and you never know how that's going to work out.
Right.
I felt that he was not at all insulted by the fact that I was going to give up the house because he understood me.
He understood. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, what would you say to actually, I think I'll ask this question in two different ways. Like if someone were you 10 years ago, 72, active, independent, maybe widowed, maybe coupled, and considering combining households with their adult children and grandchildren, what advice would you give to that version of yourself now? And then I'm going to ask you what you would say to someone who's your age now and thinking about it. But let's say, 10 years ago, if someone's listening and they're kind of in that situation, what do you think would be great for them to know that maybe you thought about at the time or maybe you didn't and you learned along the way?
Um, and you're thinking about me alone as a widow, not part of
Yeah,
the
I guess you can only sort of put yourself in that position. So let's talk to that person.
Um, it took me a little bit to think that maybe when you guys were being so generous and offering to do that, I could do that. But then I realized, I had been a caregiver for so long and had so many responsibilities that the big change for me, not selling a house, would have been trying to live with other people as much as I loved them.
Mm.
Plus, remember, my generation, I went from college to my mother's house to getting married. I had never lived by myself.
Yeah.
And I really thought I wanted that opportunity, but it was more because I needed time to myself to figure things out. And so I think if you're thinking of doing it, for some of you, it's a perfect decision. Oh, yeah, I want to live with my family. I can't live by myself. And I know people like that. And it's worked out okay for them that they moved in right away, although they probably didn't ask all the questions they should have at the time, and there were some struggles.
Mm-hmm.
But for someone like me, who was in good health, who had sufficient, not abundant, but sufficient resources, and lots of friends, that had a lot to do with it, lots of friends, it made me think that I would have jumped into moving in with you guys too quickly and never figured out who I was by myself. That was the big one.
If you hadn't taken that time to yourself after dad died for a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's really interesting. And then
Everyone's different.
Everybody's different. Yeah, absolutely. And then what about, because I can kind of guess, but like what was hard about it? Because I'll just preface this by saying, mom moved in with us. We all moved in together when my kids were like just hitting adolescence, then the teenage years. And this was like, it was a loud house sometimes. There was a lot going on, a lot of emotions and hormones and things. So how was that for you? I know you have your strategies. Like I know what your strategies are for dealing with that, but talk a little bit about that because I think that people will be wondering about how that would be for them.
Right. I think that one of the things I learned from how I was brought up, my mother was a wonderful woman, but she was a difficult woman. And she felt she had the right to interfere in any aspect of my life that was there, including bringing up the children. And so even when guys first got married, although already my son had been married for a few years, and just as an aside, I am the world's luckiest person that each of my children chose the most amazing spouses. So it was easy not to get too involved with things. But there still were things, the kids are fighting and they're yelling and all that. And my big technique, as Julie knows, that I had this little stuffed monkey. And it goes back to the Swedish, it's a fable kind of thing, but the idea of learning that not my monkey. So that I remind myself that
I think to give it context, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's not my monkey, not my circus. So it's like if this
that's right.
chaos is going on around you, you literally we should have brought it on the podcast, but you literally had this little stuffed monkey that you would have on your couch, I remember, for a long time. Now you have the fake kitty, but it was the monkey for a while. The kitty has nothing to do with me or the kids, but except that we gave it to you. But the monkey was like a visual reminder, like, I'm just going to stay out of it.
Yeah, and that was very important. Now, however, if I was home alone and you guys were traveling somewhere, it would be on my circus.
Yes.
But for the part, sometimes, and we all have different values in life, and I can remember my mother, being so critical of expenses. You're spending too much on this, you're spending too much on that. Except with my husband, he could do anything he wanted because she would do it.
He could do
but
it.
You guys have different values, economic values, not social and moral values, than I do. And I was just thinking, is that a little crazy? Keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut. That was the biggest lesson I learned. And a friend of mine became a mother-in-law and grandmother much later in life. And she asked me, what do you tell me how to be a better mother-in-law? And I use that example, just keep to yourself. And she tells me every time I see her, oh my God, with the kids, oh my God. I said, well, what do you do? I zip my lips. I keep my mouth shut. So that was probably one of the biggest lessons I learned. And I learned it negatively from the negative behavior I grew up with. I knew I wanted to change that.
Well, I have learned it the positive way from you. And let's see, the future remains unknown if I'm going to be able to emulate you as well in the boundary keeping and keeping my mouth shut in the future with my future grandchildren, which hopefully I'll be lucky enough to have someday. No, that has been, your ability to keep that boundary and allow us to make our own mistakes and learn how to deal with our own parenting and family life and things ourselves while always still being there if we needed you and wanted to discuss things with you has really been, I think, a beautiful part of what makes this work. I know when I hear from some families about their biggest concerns about multi-generational living, we all know our families and we need to have the conversations, but there are sometimes some red flags for the way people interact and the dynamics of families that could be an indicator that it might be way more difficult for some families than it has been for us, I think.
And that would be difficult if that one, because we pretty much talk about everything. I mean, there's moments I'm sure you're fuming at, I wish you didn't do it that way. And I'm feeling about, why did you do it that way? But we don't sit down and complain about them. We take a look at what our blessings are. And if it's serious enough, we have a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Now, let's flip to the lens of you at the point in your life you're in now. And I know you're already living here, so it's maybe hard to imagine like just being 82 with health challenges and what I meant by hard to imagine is like hard to imagine like making this decision to move in together now, but you are in this situation now and life does look very different now. And I think there are a lot of people out there whose parents are in their 80s and things are getting difficult and maybe they're living in a home that just doesn't work for them anymore. So then they're thinking like when we moved in together, it was because it made sense for all of us, but it wasn't because you were unable to live in a home by yourself or didn't have the support you needed. But there are, I think, a lot of families out there who are considering multi-generational living because their parents are now maybe more at a stage like you are at now. And they're considering the move in together because of that. What would you say to those parents who are in closer to a position you're in now at 82 about what they might need to know or think about or talk about with their family if they're considering a move?
Yeah, I think the first one is to talk with their families. But particularly, I think for a couple, it must be more complicated because one of them, like in our case, it was Dad and I. He would have moved in with you when you were just married. I mean, he wanted the whole family together all the time.
All the time. Yep.
That was it. And so I think as a single person, and if I'm in the stage that started almost 3 years ago now, I would have jumped at the chance. I also would have been concerned about being a burden. I'm still concerned about that sometimes, but I having real conversations about what you're feeling and what your concerns are. And if you're moving in with a married couple, in with kids, but depending how young, but with a married couple, that couple has got to talk about that because one might be perfectly happy to do it. And the other one might say, well, your mother's okay, but I don't know if I can live with her, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So again, it goes back to what you talk about a lot is communication. You know, what would be the benefits of you? And in my case, it's harder, you know, once I got sick to think of it was easier 10 years ago because I could be useful and I could do a lot of things. If it was occurring now, I know it would be necessary, absolutely. And I could understand that you wanted to do that. But I do think getting everybody on the same page is just really important and really hard to do. And if you can't do it, I don't think it's going to work.
That's a good point. So, and I think if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is if you can't have the conversations beforehand and openly talk about these things, it's probably a good indication that actually living together it could hold some real serious challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Any parting wisdom to our audience that you would like to share?
I just think for me, it's a lot of self-reflection, you know, to think about. I mean, I'm just blessed to have the family, both those I live with and the extended family, be warm and supportive. Not everybody has that.
Yeah, it's true.
But I think you need to look at all aspects of it and not take advice from people who may not know what they're talking about. It could be a friend who's living in that situation and it's horrible. Well, that may not be your case.
Yeah.
No, so I think it's just a really combination of listening to yourself. Is this going to work for you? And what's your responsibilities? You know, how much can you share financially if you need to? How much can you share responsibly? And then how much do you expect them to do? I think that's a big thing. If you're an older person, what do I expect? Do I expect them to bring me dinner every night? Do I expect to, you know, but it's self-reflection and then it's honest discussion.
I love that. And I think that's a great place to end. And I do think expectations and addressing expectations are a huge part of it and making sure they're on the surface and not just buried underneath and not discussed. I have a feeling that what's going to happen is we're going to get a lot of feedback on this episode and people are probably going to have more questions for you. So I'm going to throw it out there without having asked you already, Mom. But I think this is going to be part one of a to be continued further discussions with me and my mom on multi-gen living that we will schedule again in the future.
Well, I have lots of time in my hands, Julie, so I'd be happy to help in any way I can.
That's perfect. Thanks, Mom. I love you.
I love you too, honey.
If today's topic resonated with you, I would love to hear from you. You can email me at julie@julieford.com. Just remember, no E on Julie. And if you're someone who is living in or creating or just thinking about a multi-generational home, I hope you'll visit my website for resources, julieford.com/multi-gen. You can grab my free multi-generational living guide or my newly published complete multi-gen family toolkit to help you have a successful multi-generational home. Thanks so much for listening to Home After 50. If this episode resonated, I'd love it if you'd come hang out with me on Instagram. I am at It's Juli Ford, ITSJULIFORD. Just remember, no E on Julie. That's where I share ideas and behind the scenes about multi-generational living, real estate, business, and creating a next chapter that you love. And if you're curious about whether multi-generational living might be right for you, you can grab my free guide. It's in the link right in my Instagram bio. It's a simple way to get started imagining what's next. Because after 50, home isn't just a place, it's who we're becoming. See you next time.